Welcome to the Badlands National Park, a place where nature is raw, beautiful, and completely unforgiving. A place that reminds us of how small we are against this vast wilderness. But amidst this rugged terrain is a sense of awe that I've really never felt before. 500,000 years in the making, and only 2 days to paint. We can do this, right?
We finally made it to the Badlands, and I can tell you this place is crazy. We're only gonna be here for a couple of days. And so the plan is, we're not gonna do any big paintings, anything like that. I'm gonna pull out the sketchbook and just learn as much as I possibly can from this crazy place. So the colors are different, formations are different. Everything here is completely novel to me. And I'm excited. I've never been in the desert, let alone painted the desert before. So let's go see what we can do. So today I'm definitely gonna need a gouache bag of tricks and a big umbrella because it is gonna get hot. So this is my goal over here. We're gonna paint this sort of mountain right here. It's absolutely beautiful. What I like about it is that it has a really clear sort of shadow and light, and they make the form, they make the three-dimensional quality of the painting really stand out just as it is. So we're gonna start with this and see where we can go. But being in this place is absolutely surreal. Feels like I'm in the middle of nowhere just because I am in the middle of nowhere. So one of the things that I really love about working on painting something that is essentially all the same color is that it's just the best exercise in learning how color truly works, right? So all this rock, there's lines in it, there's stuff like that, but it's basically one single monolithic color with slight variations. But the minute the light touches it, the color changes. The minute that we start to get a lot of the sun coming down versus a lot of the light from the blue sky, that shade, the bounce, every quality of light just comes in and sings. It's really beautiful. If you want to get better at painting with color, go ahead and start painting things that are all the same color. And your ability to finesse and find a nuance in something will just skyrocket. Plus, just beautiful. So one really interesting thing that's happening is that it is so dry here. It is so dry that the minute I start to put my paint down, it basically starts to dry, which means I have to pay a lot more close attention to exactly how much paint and how much water I'm putting in. I have to kind of overcompensate a bit for the climate that we have here, which I think is brilliant. I absolutely love this. The one thing that most of my students really need to learn from the very beginning is that basically painting with gouache, and I'm sure painting with watercolor, it really comes down to water. Just the more you can kind of get in touch with what your water is doing and how to predict what it's going to do, the better off your paintings are going to be.
As midday makes its transition to afternoon, I have to call this painting done and make my way back to home base. Back at the campground, we find a very different kind of beauty, an oasis within the wilderness. While the family staves off the afternoon heat with some fun times in the water, I figure I may as well go down to the shade of the tree by the dock and paint some of the reeds that have really been stealing my attention since the moment we got here. I've often found that when I stop trying so hard to create, I create some of my best work. It's really kind of ironic. When I try hard, I end up creating things where that very struggle can be seen and felt in the passages of my brushwork on my canvas. And my audience, seeing everything I do, struggles along with me, which really isn't what I'm going for. So how then do you stop trying? There's so many skills and understandings that go into even the most basic piece of artwork that make it communicate clearly. And for sure, you need to train yourself up in these. But at the moment of creation, you have to let it go and participate freely in the dialogue that happens between you, your subject, and your paint. And so while I managed to struggle through a painting over at the Badlands National Park, it's this casual afternoon painting, the one where I stopped trying and started just letting art happen. It's this painting that I slowly fall in love with. This is what I remember when I think back to the Badlands. As the sun starts to set, we make it back over to the Badlands. Not to paint this time, but merely to soak in the pinks and the yellows and the blues of the sun going down over the rocks that have been sitting here, soaking in this very scene for more lifetimes than we could even comprehend. And the next morning, I'm up and out painting before we head on to our next destination. My goal? To learn more about how to make sense of this alien landscape that I've found myself in. And I can tell you, it does not work out quite the way that I expected.
It's really hot out, it's the middle of the day, and I want to keep working on my sketches. So I found this place in the shade. I don't think I'm going to be in the shade for much longer, so probably a short sketch, but have a look at this view. So I think I'm going to try and paint some of this right here. What's really interesting to me is that the light and the shadow is so clear, but within the light and the shadow, there's so many variations in color and hue movement as it goes. It's really, really cool, but none of it breaks the light and shadow pattern. And so that's what I'm going to try to be working on. You probably can't see it very well with the camera, but it's absolutely beautiful. So we're going to give that a go.
I often like to start out some of my gouache paintings almost like watercolor. Lots of water, lots of paint, just establishing these really big ideas, and slowly getting thicker with my paint as my shapes get smaller and more specific. However, I quickly find myself in a position where once I've put my main shapes in, I find they don't actually communicate all that well. I needed more context, or perhaps to zoom out in order to get more elements so that the shapes that I did put in would make more sense on their own, or perhaps maybe just feel more full and complete. Like I said back in Boone, often the greatest thing you can do is find a scene that already feels like a painting, and it'll basically paint itself. This scene, as much as I learned from it, is the counterpoint. A scene where the basic elements of the painting just don't quite add up to making a great painting. That's okay though. We were always here just to make sketches and to learn, and so I wrap up with no grandiose ideas about how it might become my next big piece, and move on to find something else I can paint before the day gets too hot. This time around, I find a scene where the shapes and the colors have a lot of clarity. I absolutely love the blue of the sky and the heavy texture that we find in the rock formations, not to mention the clarity we find between the lights and the shadows. Again, it's in these ancient formations of rocks that are all essentially the same color that you can find an immense amount of color variation in between the light and the shadow, the bounce light and the skylight. Nearing the end, it's the balance of detail and clarity that I find most interesting as I'm working through this one. Trying to find that really fine line that results in something compelling without detailing the life out of it. There is so many more places I want to explore here, so much magic in these ancient mountains. But if it's mountains I'm after, my next destination is going to deliver more than I could possibly imagine. Next we go to Glacier National Park.